So you can't feel the pelvic floor or not as delightfully as you wished. Perhaps you are struggling with anhedonia, lack of pleasure because you've been through too much stress and your pelvic floor is kind of numb. Or perhaps you just leak every time you sneeze because there's like no good connection in this very intimate area. So stay tuned because I'm going to share with you three somatic movement exercises that will gently help you to recover sensitivity and embody sensual pleasure. I am Candia Raquel, a Mexican sensualist, scientist, and artist that could only eat tacos for the rest of her life. And you are at the Sensual Sessions Podcast, the place to explore sensing pleasure through your senses and moving in a way that it's free from inhibition and full of self expression. Okay, so perhaps you want to skip right onto the pleasure part, but it's very important that we begin with the frontal part of the brain first, meaning learning a little bit about the anatomy of the pelvic floor and what's going on along the right and wrong way to exercise the pelvic floor. So you have enough factual elements for self consent. And of course, if you already watched this episode and you already have this information, then by all means, skip right onto the exercises. So, first off, what's the pelvic floor? This is a pelvis. If you can see it, if you're listening, I am showing a plastic model of the pelvic bones, which are at the center of your body. And the pelvic floor is a literal floor made of muscles in the base of the pelvis here that controls what comes out or what comes into the pelvic floor. Now I'm gonna show uh, an image of the pelvic floor muscles, showing a group of three muscles called the pelvic floor, which is made of the pubococcygeus, iliococcygeus, ischiococcygeus. These have a pan shape, and they are very important in assisting the support of the organs that are on top of the pelvic floor, and very importantly, they also assist the role of the ring muscles that are the sphincters. In the pelvic floor, we have three important sphincters, women. We have women and men, we have the anal sphincter, the anus, also the urethra, and women, we have the vagina with its vaginal canal and also the vaginal uh, muscle that works like a sphincter closing or opening. Okay, so the thing is that the pelvic floor doesn't end here. The pelvic floor is not like a strange thing floating in the universe by itself. On the contrary, the pelvic floor is the base of the core system. So now I'm showing you and the book of Anatomy of Movement from Blandine Calais Germain, and I'm showing you a diagram of the core system that is in the center of your body. It goes from the rib cage all the way to the pelvis. And it's like a sack of potatoes. Here it's another image of the core system, which is a literal bag. So this sack of potatoes, instead of potatoes, contains your intestines, your stomach, your liver, your bladder, your uterus, your kidneys, all the digestive organs that are in your abdomen are inside this container called the core system. And interestingly enough, the pelvic floor is the literal floor of the core. So this is already the anatomical imagery of the core system. Now I'm gonna share with you a metaphorical imagery. So imagine the core system is a can of Campbell's soup that instead of soup, the core contains your digestive organs, and it has different muscles around. It's the transversus abdominis. On top is the diaphragm as the lid. On the back, bringing together like the envelope, is the psoas major and the multifidi. And the highlight of this season in the Sensual Sessions podcast, the base of the Campbell soup in the core system is the pelvic floor. So what would happen with a can of Campbell soup if the base of the can is damaged? Well, there would be a problem in the whole system. So it's no surprise that if the pelvic floor is just mildly numb, you may have mild postural issues, mild digestive issues, mild sexual issues, mild breathing issues, etc. And the great news is that if you improve just 1% of your pelvic floor, all of those functions will improve, especially because the pelvic floor along the core system has the main responsibility, the main function of respiration. And you breathe 22,000 times a day. So if you improve your pelvic floor just a little bit, you're gonna repeat that improvement so much that your whole life will change. And that's the aim of the 3 exercises that I'm gonna guide you through in this episode, that you get to very gently, little by little, improve the doings of your pelvic floor. And you do that by becoming more aware of the sensations in this very intimate area, but always within the context of what the pelvic floor is doing as part of the core system. Which brings us to talk about a little bit on the right and wrong way of exercising the pelvic floor. So first, the wrong way is to treat the pelvic floor as something separated from the core system. For example, when you try to do all those exercises of contracting the pelvic floor randomly, following a certain count, like, okay, let's contract for 5 counts. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now slow. 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. Or even worse, like this trendy new age idea of having a very tight and closed pelvic floor, not to lose your vital energy or some kind of nonsense. And they tell you to practice by interrupting the stream of urine every time you're peeing, which can be so detrimental, breaking havoc in the way your nervous system organizes your reflexes, the micturition reflex, and that affects also the orgasmic reflex and even breathing. So don't do that. Like, that's, I have just given you the facts on why I am utterly against Kegels. Don't do Kegels. They are bad for your pelvic floor and bad for your health because they work the pelvic floor in isolation. So then they train you to use the pelvic floor in isolation, so it furthers the disconnection from the core system, meaning from respiration, from posture, from digestion, etc. That's one reason, like the anatomical reason. And the fundamental ethical reason for me is that it completely bypasses self-consent. It's invasive. At no moment you get to ask yourself if you're ready to directly work with this very intimate area that is the pelvic floor. That is an area that has been bombarded with religious taboos, with bad, intimate past experiences, with disinformation, even in the scientific world. So it's very important that every time that you get to work not only with the pelvic floor, but with your body, you're making sure that you're really asking yourself for permission to do so. We have made great progress on setting boundaries to the rest of the world and demanding the rest of the world for our consent. But we need to be consistent with that and also work with our self-consent, which leads us to the right way. What's the right way? Well, first off, it's self-consensual. You get not only to ask yourself if it makes sense at a rational level to work with your pelvic floor, but you get to listen to the messages from your unconscious being, which is your body, your flesh, that communicates through sensations. And the main sensations to take into account are either pleasure or pain. Those are our two guidelines in the compass of survival. If it's painful, like you gotta not do that. If you are feeling some kind of unease or discomfort with a mere idea of doing anything with the pelvic floor, then that's a clear no. And if, on the contrary, you feel like a kind of ease and relief and the pleasure that comes with relaxation and openness, because you feel at a bodily level that things are right and good, then it's a yes. Okay? So that's the ethical self-consensual part of the right way to work with the pelvic floor. And the scientific way is working the pelvic floor in synergy with the core system, understanding the pelvic floor as the inseparable base of this container, and becoming aware, like not only in theory, but really getting curious on sensing how your pelvic floor sensations are connected with your breathing and the rest of the core system. Okay? So now you have all the facts that you need to decide shall this is a good moment for you to do these 3 exercises with the pelvic floor. And if so, let's go ahead. So something that is also important to understand about the pelvic floor is that it's not only a part of the core system. What other system you think is integrated with the pelvic floor? This is a good question. So what comes out from the pelvic floor? That's an eschatological question, but you go a few times a day to the bathroom because of a reason, because the pelvic floor is the exit door of something that came into your body through another door. So it's part of the same system. There's an entrance and there's an exit in your body. And in the middle, there's a whole hallway called the digestive system. So digestion begins in your mouth, which is a ring muscle, and digestion ends in the pelvic floor, either pooping through the anal sphincter, which is a ring muscle, or peeing via the urethra, that is also a ring muscle. So you see, we are integrated. And for these 3 exercises, we are going to work with this connection of the ring muscles, the sphincters. And for embodiment's sake, we're gonna use a metaphorical image that our face is a mirror of the pelvic floor. So let's close the face, like make a fist face, like close your eyes and your mouth very tight. And that's an image of tightening the pelvic floor. Now let go. And by the way, like Kegels are about tightening and tightening and tightening. So what happens if you tighten and tighten and tighten the muscles in your face, the ring muscles around the eyes and your mouth? This is going to be the expression in your face. Well, the same if you just do tightening Kegels, you're going to have a clenched pelvic floor. And as any other set of muscles, we need the pelvic floor muscles to contract and shorten, like when you tighten your face. And we need them also to relax and let go, so you don't end up constipated or in your face, so you can smile and wink and move. Okay, so this is like the way to go with this imagery. And we're gonna do our quick 3 steps to embody sensual pleasure. So we come to the body first. And we begin with presence. Let's come to the presence of this moment here now in our body, simply by sensing the breath. Just get curious about your breath. How are you breathing? What's the rhythm? What's the shape of your breath? Like, does it moves your rib cage, perhaps your belly? And now notice if simply by becoming aware of your breathing, your breathing spontaneously became longer on the exhale, which is what we want, because that would mean that your nervous system by itself already, by given the space and the opportunity, is shifting to the parasympathetic mode of rest and digest, which we need to better organize the pelvic floor, to allow the pelvic floor to self-organize in a more optimal way. Okay, that's presence. Now posture. Become curious about your posture without forcing any change. Like, okay, where's your weight supported? Perhaps in your feet. Perhaps you can notice your sit bones. And also perhaps just by doing this quick body scan, there's already a response of your unconscious self, which is your body, self-organizing through a more upright and free posture. And the last step is pleasure. And begin with self-consent. Is it a good moment for you to delight in pleasure? Pleasure is always important to acknowledge as as the north star of your compass. We want to move away from pain and we want to move always through pleasure because that's our clearest signal of health. Health is pleasurable and it's kind of a given mostly. Simply existing is pleasurable, but what I want to inquire is if this is a good moment to give into delight, into savoring the sensations of pleasure present in your flesh. And notice, like rationally, makes sense? Yeah. Okay, now bodily. How does your body respond to that question? If you're feeling like softening, opening, then it's a yes. If you're kind of clenching and tightening, that's a no, and that's a just go through the exercises that I'm gonna guide you through, but just acknowledge what feels good and keep on doing it without necessarily like delighting, unless it's a yes. Okay, so let's begin with the 3 exercises. Exercise number 1, it's yawning. That is about opening the face, opening the whole body, opening the pelvic floor naturally, as in relaxation. The second exercise is drinking with a straw, whether you have like a mate tea with a straw like me here, or any reusable straw, or you just wanna do it sucking your cheeks, that's great, which is the opposite movement of the pelvic floor, which is contracting, narrowing. And the third exercise is natural breathing, which we are not gonna alter in any way. We are just gonna get curious on how the pelvic floor does the previous qualities, how the pelvic floor naturally relaxes and expands when we breathe, inhaling, and how it naturally contracts and shortens, as in sucking with a straw, when we exhale. All of these 3 exercises are about embodying the natural ways, the natural functioning of the pelvic floor in connection with the core system. So it's not prescriptive. This is not about making it happen. On the contrary, this is about letting it happen. This is about getting curious to see if we can sense even the most nuanced sensation of your pelvic floor. And through this, like very mindful listening, we restore the trust of our pelvic floor in us. Okay, so let's begin with the first exercise, yawning. So, perhaps just the simple word of yawning made you yawn like me, or perhaps my yawn was contagious as it happens and you're already yawning. That was a good one. I really needed to yawn and I wasn't aware. This is what this work is about. To listening our what we need in a bodily unconscious level before the body has to scream for it. So in case your yawn is kind of stuck, let's do Huti Alon's process to invite the yawning. And it's about, here's the technique. You're gonna inhale all the air that you can And when you feel that you're full, you're gonna take an extra sip of inhalation, and this extra inhale inhalation most likely will unleash a huge yawning response. Give it a try. So let's inhale all that you can. Inhale, inhale, inhale even more, like you're a balloon about to explode. And then take an extra sip. Oh my God. That was a huge yawn. Welcome all the yawns that come. And with that, imagine that your pelvic floor is all just so yawning. So yawn with all the body. Allow the yawn to take over you. Like, remember, sensuality is about the receptive aspect of receiving the pleasure, sensing the pleasure, and the active aspect of expressing the pleasure through movement. This is what completes the circle of delight. So when you're yawning, like really let yourself go. This is a great place to also clean yourself from shame and taboo and all that nonsense. You and in the beginning, I was covering my mouth because I was kind of embarrassed, even though I was aware that I was kind of embarrassed about my journey. But now I don't care. And every time you yawn, use the natural movement of the yawn to let go even more in your ring muscles around the mouth, the eyes, and the anus. Especially work with the anus, which is the most, well, it's the strongest sphincter in the whole body. And it tends to be super tight. So use this to let go. So you're not forcing the opening of your ring muscles. You're just using the yawn as an imagery to get a mirroring of the sensation of the opening of the pelvic floor. This is very important to prevent constipation, to increase flexibility in the hips, to improve mobility in the low back, and allow all the minute movements of the sacroiliac joint that are necessary for gait balance every time you walk. Also, if you are yawning nonstop, perhaps your brain was already starving for oxygen. Ah, Ruthie Alon used to say that yawning was like a self-medicine for the nervous system, like a very powerful self-regulation means. So every time you need to yawn in your everyday life, please go ahead. If you gotta lock yourself in the bedroom and run outside from the board meeting to yawn, please do so because your brain is craving for it. Okay. So if you're still yawning, keep on yawning, but let them fade out. Well, I describe the next exercise that is a straw. And imagine that you are like a fish making bubbles in the ocean and suck your cheeks a little bit and make a, a fish mouth. Imagine that you're like swimming among huge sponges and corals and anemones and jellyfishes in the Caribbean in warm turquoise waters. And suck your cheeks and notice if your pelvic floor is also kind of sucking the butt cheeks and everything. If you're a woman, the labia. If you're a man, I don't know. Let me know if perhaps the cremaster gets involved and there's some ball movement going on. So suck your cheeks and notice what happens. And of course, the way to practice this on your everyday life is to change coffee for mate tea. So you get to use your bombilla metal straw. Mm, mm. Mate is delicious. Or your favorite beverage. Try it out with a reusable straw. We don't want straws in the noses of turtles, please. Let's be very responsible with every interaction we have with ourselves and the world. See, this practice of sensuous, very mindful, delicate self-consent ripples in gentleness, in care for the world, in every little thing you do, like drinking from a straw. And also enjoying how your pelvic floor draws in. Try to do this in the context of curiosity, playfulness. We want to let this happen. We want to allow and motivate the natural ways of our pelvic floor in integration with the systems it is involved with. You saw already with breathing, with yawning. Now this is with the digestive system. And you can also have an internal laugh because you know something a lot of people don't know when you see them at Starbucks drinking with a straw their frappuccinos. Perhaps you can go tell them like, hey, are you aware that you are also sucking with your pelvic floor? Ah, I just remember a super cool Pilates exercise that I used to teach my trainees when I used to give Pilates teacher trainings in my studios. That was the metaphorical imagery of picking up raisins with the pelvic floor, with your favorite sphincter. Like you can use the anal sphincter as imagery or the vagina. It's super cool. Okay, if you're done with with this exercise of the straw, let's move on to the third and most important somatic movement, gentle exercise to embody the sensual pleasure in the pelvic floor, which is natural breathing. You don't have to do anything, just stay there existing. And notice if the previous exercises left an echo. If you can get a nuanced, felt sense of how your pelvic floor breathes, because the pelvic floor does breathe. I mean, you don't have a nose down there, but that's the base of the core system of, of the container, which has a lid that is the primary muscle of respiration, the diaphragm muscle. And the diaphragm muscle, at an autonomic nervous system level, works in concert with the pelvic floor. They have a synergy. Every time you inhale, the diaphragm contracts and the pelvic floor relaxes to create more space inside the thorax that pulls in via negative pressure the air that you inhale, while pushing very gently all the contents of the abdominal cavity, your digestive organs, down and to the sides. That's why your belly inflates when you inhale. Like air is up in the ribs, but the diaphragm pushes all the organs, so the belly pops out when you inhale. And the pelvic floor does the same. So when you inhale, you perhaps can feel how your belly expands, but also your pelvic floor in the same measure. Important. It's a minuscule movement in the pelvic floor, about 2 millimeters range, because the bones of your pelvis move not only during childbirth, that a baby with the head of a cantaloupe has to come out. So the bones does move a lot during childbirth. But every time you breathe, your pelvic bones move a couple millimeters because of what I mentioned, of the contraction of the diaphragm, and because all the body downstairs, all the way down to the basement, which is the pelvic floor, creates more room for the contents of the abdominal cavity, meaning the organs, to travel down and make space upstairs for the air. So every time you inhale, notice if you can sense the excursion of your organs, like the traveling of your intestines, just a little bit, a few millimeters down to your belly and down to the pelvic floor. And it's a gentle opening, a gentle yawning. So notice if every time you inhale, perhaps you can even sense how your mouth gently widens and softens. Even if your mouth is closed, it gently widens and softens every time you inhale. And so does the pelvic floor and its ring muscles, welcoming all the intestines down there. Every time you inhale, the pelvic floor widens and opens. Okay. Have you already noticed what happens when you exhale? Get curious. What does your pelvic floor does every time you exhale? Be really curious. What happens in the core as a whole? Already knowing that the base of the pelvic floor of the core system is the pelvic floor and the lid is the diaphragm. So what happens? You already know that everything goes down when you inhale. So what happens when you exhale? Again, everything goes down and the pelvic floor expands when you inhale. So when you exhale, what happens? What would be the opposite? Ah, yes. The pelvic floor naturally contracts, naturally draws in. It's almost as a sensation of narrowing as a black hole that is very tiny, like the size of a pinhead that can suck in a whole galaxy. That's what black holes does. and you have one in between your legs when you exhale. That's the pelvic floor. So notice if there's, if you can allow, all that we are exploring, it's an exploration of the natural wonders of your being. So we are like with our backpack on a trail in a forest, like watching the sunset, the river, the waterfall, the animals, like wow. And we are seeing everything that's going on. We are not fabricating a sunrise. We are curiously witnessing, acknowledging, taking in what we see. The same with your body. Your pelvic floor is already yawning every time you inhale, so to say, and it's already sucking as a straw every time you exhale. So the exercise here, the practice, is to become aware of that sensation. And by doing that, we are resensitizing our pelvic floor. We are motivating the innervation, meaning the terminals of the neurons to communicate in a better way with the muscles of the pelvic floor. Now let's see if we can feel it all, if we can sense the pelvic floor expanding on the inhalation and retreating into the body, bringing all the organs back into the body and up, even into the rib cage on the exhalation. So allow for the opening and full let go and surrender on the inhale, and then a potent drawing in on the exhale. It's almost as if the inhalation was the water of the sea. So you inhale and you open and you take the water, opening and reaching into the sand of the beach. When you inhale, you reach for more space, and when you exhale is the withdrawal of all the water coming in. Just like before the tsunami, that you see that the water retreats into the ocean, you are the ocean, and when you exhale, all the water sucks in. That's the sensation of the pelvic floor muscles naturally coming in and up into the body, into the base of the abdomen, into the pelvis on the exhale. It's a very potent sensation and primal. And it's a basis of survival. We do this every time we breathe. This is an important movement for excretion and, of course, for sexual expression and delight. And this is just what happens when we decide to allow it to happen. When we get out of the way, when we remove the parasitic tensions of those prescriptive isolating exercises, when we clean ourselves from taboos and all that, and we just get curious about the wonders of our bodily wilderness. So these are the 3 exercises of somatic movement to gently embody, resensitize pleasure, this intimate area of the body. And the invitation is that every time in your day-to-day that you come across a beverage with a reusable straw, to take it as an opportunity to get curious about your pelvic floor. Every time you feel like yawning, you go with the reflex and take it as an opportunity to learn more about your pelvic floor. By paying attention in the sensitivity of these muscles, you're improving the innervation. You're improving the connection between your neurons to glue, to myelinize, which means learning, in other words, which will improve the recruitment, the involvement of these muscles every time you breathe. And again, if you're just chilling before going to bed or taking a break and you're just like resting in idle, contemplating, see if you can allow yourself, give yourself self consent to notice the sensations of the pelvic floor while breathing. And this is the way to go ever so gently. And remember, if you get to improve, to facilitate the doings of the pelvic floor, just by a little percentage, your whole life will improve because of the amount of repetitions of the pelvic floor natural contractions on the 22,000 times a day that you breathe. And here's something. There are two ways to know if you're actually doing something or not with your pelvic floor, if you're really doing these exercises or not. And the first way is like, yay, I have a localized physical sensation of the pelvic floor involved. Like I could really feel it, like letting go on the inhale and contracting on the exhale, which is great. You may even notice like, why is the right side of my pelvic floor more aware? And does it has to do anything with me crossing always the right leg on top of the other, or my posture or whatever? You can get curious, or wow, the back side of my pelvic floor is on, but the front part is super numb, or the other way around. Like the perineal area in the front is like hardcore, like rock, and the back part is like radio silence. I don't feel anything. That's one way to know, like you get a physical sensation. But most likely, when you begin to explore the pelvic floor, you don't know, you don't have, like in my case, it took me almost, it was a several year journey to fully recover from the pelvic floor because there was no information. But to get like a clear sensation of the pelvic floor took me months. But what I could feel right away, and what I have noticed working from 1999, that I began teaching Pilates, and I saw this with my students, is the other kind of result that you will most likely notice. That is a shift in your mental state, because when working this way, we tend to move to parasympathetic dominance, which engaging the pelvic floor muscles reinforces. So you may feel like more relaxed, more chill, like when you're digesting and you don't feel like doing any math on Excel spreadsheets. That's a sign that, yeah, spot on with the exercises. Or another resonance that you can notice is in your posture. Perhaps your posture is spontaneously upright and you're feeling spontaneously free. You're not like, ah, yeah, I have a great, but no, it's like you feel the effect of the pelvic floor as part of the core system. Either you feel like more relaxed because the pelvic floor is more involved with the core system during breathing, or you can feel that your posture is like upright and free because the pelvic floor become involved with the core, supporting your posture. And this is the result of improving your connection of the pelvic floor with your autonomic nervous system, your unconscious part of your nervous system modus operandi. So, in short, how we want to go about the pelvic floor? First and foremost, with self consent, then with curiosity by observing without interfering. And this curiosity will foster the state of awareness that is what we want, that allows for our nervous system to do its thing of neuromuscular reorganization, and you will feel a spontaneous involvement of all yourself. You will feel spontaneously better, and it's gonna be delightful. You'll already be in the state of sensual pleasure. So I really hope you take these 3 exercises with you for life. Make them part of your lifestyle. Practice them as a way to self-care, to become more intimate with yourself, to restore the trust of your flesh in you, to live a sensual lifestyle. And if you're ready to learn more about this very intimate and important area of your body, I invite you to join Pelvic Floor Awakening. This summer round of the program closes doors tomorrow, and there's a click below in the description for you to click, shall you wish to join us. So if you're ready to improve bladder control, to increase pleasure, sensitivity, I really invite you to make this the summer that you bloom from within, and join us inside the program by clicking the link below. Hope to see you inside, and until then, remember to take the time to sense your fire so you can share the flame.